iStats class, this is another homework question from your 7-4 homework. We're still doing population, standard deviation, and a confidence interval. We have the lower number and the upper number around that parameter notation. That means we're doing a confidence interval, and it says it right there as well. But when we have data like this, we're going to have to enter the data in. You don't want to go up here and click StatCrunch. You want to use it with this little box. Remember, this box will open up StatCrunch as well, and it'll go ahead and populate all the data in there for you. So there's all our data. Now we're going to go to stat variance stats. Remember, we have to use variance, which is the square of the standard deviation. And we're going to say one sample with data. Okay, now the first question says do the standard deviation for men. So we're going to select the men column, and then we're going to come down and do a confidence interval with a 95 level of confidence. Okay, we're going to tell it to compute that, and there's our lower and upper limit again for the variance. The standard deviation, we need to take the square root of those. So I'm going to take the square root of both the lower and the upper number. All right, and these are going to be the two numbers that are our lower bounds and upper bounds. Square root of the lower, square root of the upper, because again those are variance values. So I'm going to move this over so I can actually see it. So that's 2 point, it wants to 2 decimal places, so 2.44, and it wants this guy to 2 places, so 6.49. Alright, and then for women, you do the same thing. You would just go back in here, close what we just did, stat, variance stats, one sample with data. Now they want to know where's your data. We want the women. Confidence level still 95%. There's my lower and upper number. Okay, there's what the StatCrunch gives me. I take the square root of both of those numbers, and there are the standard deviations for the lower and upper. So I'm going to move that over here again, so I can type it in as I write it. So it's 4 point to 2 decimal places, 99, and the upper number is 13.26 to 2 places. Alright, and then the third part, it says compare and interpret these results. So notice all of them are, the first part of the sentence is they do overlap or they don't overlap. Well, this one goes all the way up to 6. This one starts at 5, or roughly 5. So from 5 all the way up to 6.5, they do overlap. So these intervals do overlap. The lower number here is not bigger than the upper number here. So there is going to be some overlap between the two. So you can throw away any of them that say they do not overlap, because they do. So it's got to be either B or D. Now what you have to understand is because they do overlap, then the variations are not substantially different, because it could be, because we're doing a confidence interval for the, not the variation, but the standard deviation. It could be that the standard deviation of these two sets are roughly the same. So that means that they're not substantially different since they don't overlap. So it's kind of a weeding out the bad answers first, because of the fact that they do overlap, I eliminated 2 immediately. And then the reason why D wasn't the answer, it says since the intervals overlap, they appear to have different amounts of variation. They're only different if they don't touch and don't overlap. If this lower number, let's hypothetically say this lower number was like 8. So we're 95% confident that the true population standard deviation would fall between 2.44 and 6.49, and then we're 95% confident the true standard deviation for women would be, again, if this were 8 to 13. And so since the interval we're 95% confident in here is completely different than this one, there don't overlap, then and the level of those confidences, we would be fairly certain that this one is substantially higher enough, more variation for women, enough to where we'd say it's different from the men. Okay, but because they do overlap, we can't say that. So it looks like they're not substantially different.